That morning, Jake started his day as usual by smoking weed. But this time, Jake faced a simple problem. His lighter was broken, making it impossible to light his pipe. After trying to ask for help from his neighbor, who wouldn't answer the door, Jake finally decided to leave his house. As he wandered through the city streets, Jake realized something strange. There wasn't a single person outside, as if the city had been completely abandoned. His suspicions grew stronger when Jake discovered 2 corpses lying in the park. Their bodies were severely decomposed, causing Jake to panic and attempt to call an ambulance. Unfortunately, his phone had no signal, not even for emergency calls. Jake decided to go to his family's house to check on them. However, what Jake found there was far worse. At his father's house, Jake discovered that all his family members, including his younger sister Megan, had died. Their bodies were stiff, leaving Jake in a state of shock. Trying to calm himself, Jake went back out to the streets, convinced that all of this was just a bad trip caused by substance abuse. However, his hopes were crushed when Jake met a teenager named Sam. The boy told Jake that what he was seeing was absolutely real. Sam explained that everyone who had fallen asleep at a certain time had died. Only those who, for some reason, couldn't sleep managed to survive. To stay alive, the remaining survivors had to stay awake. Their methods were extreme. They injected adrenaline straight into their hearts and jumped into ice-cold pools. Along the way, Jake and Sam encountered 2 girls who had also managed to survive. They joined forces to try and get through this apocalypse together. However, life without sleep began to take its toll. One of the girls started losing her sanity, talking to herself and acting erratically. Jake tried to lighten the mood by joking around with Sam, even fantasizing that one day they might turn into sharks that never sleep. But the jokes only brought brief laughter. Tragedy struck. The girl who had begun to lose her mind finally fell asleep. Sam tried injecting her with adrenaline to save her, but it was too late. She died, leaving her surviving friend in deep sorrow. Things only got worse. The supplies they relied on to stay awake were running low, and the fear of falling asleep loomed over them. In a panic, the remaining girls stole a car along with all their supplies, leaving Jake and Sam hopeless. They tried to chase her, but Jake collapsed in the middle of the road. Sam had to take the wheel and tried to wake Jake up. In a desperate move, Sam found a screwdriver in the car's glove box and stabbed it into Jake's leg to jolt him awake. Jake woke up, but his mind was still scrambled. He hallucinated, seeing his sister Megan driving and imagining a comet striking Earth in the past. Meanwhile, Sam had to continue the chase alone. However, the pursuit was interrupted when a plane landed right on the road in front of them. Even though the situation became more absurd, there was a glimmer of hope. The shock Jake felt finally snapped him back to reality. Ellis, the owner of the plane, was clearly displeased with the unexpected situation. However, after a brief conversation, Ellis agreed to share some of the essential supplies he had. In return, Ellis asked Jake and Sam to take him to the city hospital. Ellis had a reason. He wanted to check something there while also replenishing his medical stock. When they arrived at the hospital, they eventually parted ways. Ellis headed straight to the ICU, while Jake and Sam decided to look for something useful in the pharmacy. Unfortunately, their search came up empty. They decided to head upstairs, hoping to figure out their next move. What they didn't expect was that the ICU was full of survivors. Led by a doctor named Ali, the group used IV drips to stay awake while working to find answers to this catastrophe. Ellis, driven by curiosity, began examining documents there. He tried to identify patterns in the times of death of patients who had died in their sleep. Based on his findings, Ellis concluded that the deadly sleep phenomenon had started almost simultaneously in various cities, with a difference of only 1 minute. The epicenter of the event seemed to be near Colorado. Ellis was convinced that the solution to all of this lay in its origin. He intended to head to that location to uncover what had truly happened and, if possible, find a cure. Ali and one of her colleagues decided to join Ellis. They didn't want to stay in this place any longer. Sam also pleaded with Ellis to let him and Jake join the journey. Although Jake seemed less enthusiastic about the idea, they all eventually agreed to leave together. On the way, Ali reminisced about the chaos that struck the hospital when several patients suddenly died in their sleep. She remembered how the head of the clinic immediately ordered the staff to contact other hospitals to find out if they were experiencing the same situation. From the window, Ali caught a glimpse of her friend sneaking out, getting into a car, and leaving without telling anyone. The group stole the fastest car they could find in the parking area to reach their next destination as quickly as possible. This time, the only anti-sleep aid they had was super spicy chili peppers that Sarah had managed to snatch from the hospital. After a long journey, they finally arrived in the next city. Unfortunately, the hospital there had burned down. There was almost no hope of finding records of patient death times. Jake recalled one other place in the city that might hold clues: the morgue behind the police station. They headed there, But what they found at the location was completely unexpected. A massive party was underway, filled with people seemingly having a great time. Gaining entry into the coroner's office wasn't easy. However, with his way with words, Ellis managed to convince the slightly unhinged security guard to let them in. Meanwhile, Sarah, who was also part of the group, suddenly asked the team for permission. She wanted to join the party crowd to dance, perhaps for the last time. Feeling responsible, Jake volunteered to watch over her. Jake promised Allie that the two of them would return soon. Ellis and Allie continued their search in the coroner's office but found no records of death times among the documents there. However, Allie noticed a computer in the corner of the room and hoped it might provide new clues. On the other side, Jake, who was initially watching over Sarah, started losing focus. After drinking a glass of energy drink, Jake began hallucinating. In the middle of the crowd, Jake saw the figure of his younger sister, Megan, and unconsciously started chasing after her. Allie asked Sam to try unlocking the computer in the room. With some nervous effort, Sam finally succeeded, but their attempts caused the computer to lock again. Unaware of this, Allie got busy with something else, leaving them without crucial access to the data. After a while, the team managed to retrieve data from another source. They discovered that patients at this hospital had died at 4:02 a.m. This meant the deadly sleep phenomenon didn't start here but occurred earlier elsewhere. With this clue, they realized they needed to backtrack several kilometers to find the origin location. Meanwhile, Sarah panicked upon realizing Jake was missing. She tried to leave the crowd and search for him, but Jake was lost in his own hallucinations. Jake was talking to the shadow of his younger sister Megan, while bitter memories of family conflict after their parents' divorce resurfaced in his mind. Allie started calculating and eventually pinpointed the exact location where the disaster began. They needed to head to Dallas, about an hour and a half away from their current position. In the frantic search for Jake, Sam finally found him and tried to snap him out of his hallucinations. However, just as Jake came to his senses, they realized Sarah had already fallen asleep, right in the middle of the dance floor. They tried to wake her, but it was too late. Allie was furious with Jake, blaming him for being negligent, and refused to take him any further. Ellis agreed with Allie's decision, but Sam passionately defended Jake. Sam insisted that if Jake wasn't allowed to come, he wouldn't continue the journey either. In the end, though reluctantly, Allie agreed to let Jake stay with them. Their plans changed when Allie received a message from her friend, Lex. In the message, Lex invited anyone in need of treatment to head to Austin. Ellis, unwilling to change course to Dallas, stuck to his plan. He gave Allie a radio so they could stay in touch later. Jake and Sam decided to join Allie on her trip to Austin. Jake felt responsible for what had happened and wanted to make up for his mistake by helping Allie. Several days without sleep began to affect everyone differently. People around them started showing signs of losing their sanity. Even an ordinary clerk had turned into a maniac, desperate to stay awake. To fight off drowsiness, Jake and Sam started playing a movie-guessing game while driving. Their journey was interrupted when someone fell from a bridge onto their windshield, causing them to lose control and veer off the road. The impact nearly caused Allie to faint. To revive her, they poured pure alcohol on her face. While searching for water in the car, Sam noticed a mysterious figure standing on the bridge, but he couldn't see it clearly. Sam found a bottle of soda and brought it back to help Allie, whose condition was worsening due to a concussion. Jake decided to look for a new car since finding help on the road seemed almost impossible. Meanwhile, Ellis continued his journey alone. He fought off sleep by listening to old voice recordings from his past, which gave him the strength to keep moving. Allie, Jake, and Sam eventually arrived in a small town after walking several kilometers under the scorching sun. They heard loud music in the distance, giving them hope of finding help. Jake decided to go ahead and check it out. Following the sound of music, Jake found a park filled with hanging skeletons and people in bizarre costumes. However, the help he was hoping for never came. Allie eventually passed out from exhaustion and dehydration. The last thing she saw was a figure in a black robe approaching. Allie woke up in a strange building surrounded by frightening people. An old woman resembling a witch handed her a potion to drink. After drinking it, Allie slowly regained consciousness. When she opened her eyes, Allie saw Jake and Sam looking calm and showing no signs of fear. It turned out they had arrived at Eastside Hospital, now run by a priest named Julio. The priest introduced his guests to the teenagers in his congregation. Since no one knew what the future held, they decided to celebrate the Day of the Dead. That was why everyone was dressed in strange and spooky costumes. The potion given to Allie had been prepared by a local herbalist named Refuge. Thanks to that potion, the community had managed to stay awake for several days while maintaining their sanity and energy. The priest then gave his guests a tour of the parish. During the walk, Sam was introduced to a girl named Carmen, who was about his age. It was a joyful moment Sam hadn't experienced in a long time. While the old woman tended to Allie, Carmen took Sam to the most beautiful spot in the parish. She also introduced Sam to an elderly blind man who had survived with the help of his guide dog. But the mood shifted dramatically when the dog suddenly started barking. The old man warned the teenagers to return to safety immediately. Unfortunately, Sam and Carmen didn't make it in time to find shelter. While Sam was talking to Carmen about their mission to find medicine, a blood-soaked maniac approached and attacked Carmen. Sam bravely defended his friend, even though his life was also at risk. Fortunately, Carmen's screams drew the attention of the adults, and Father Juan, along with his team, arrived just in time to save them. Ali immediately checked Carmen's condition. Her injuries were severe, and Carmen had to undergo surgery without anesthesia because she couldn't be allowed to fall asleep. Using the last of her strength, Ali led the emergency operation, asking Sam to assist her in stitching the wounds. Meanwhile, Jake, unable to handle the tension, stepped outside and vowed to guard the entrance. However, anger and frustration drove him to arm himself with an iron pipe and hunt for the maniac on his own. A few other men joined the search, though some ended up becoming the psychopath's next victims. Inside the operating room, Ali struggled to stay focused. She kept talking to Carmen, ensuring the girl stayed awake while stitching the deep wounds on her arm. Suddenly, the lights went out. Father Julio immediately left to activate the backup generator. It turned out the power outage was no accident. The maniac had cut the electricity, and now the priest was in grave danger. Ali moved Carmen to the altar and continued the surgery by candlelight, keeping her calm by talking to her. But the peace didn't last. The maniac burst into the room, forcing Ali to shield the teenagers with her own body. Although the psychopath was gravely injured, he appeared unstoppable, growling like a wild animal and preparing to attack. Jake arrived just in time to stop him. Acting quickly, Jake managed to subdue the maniac. By the time Father Julio and his assistant reached the altar, the danger had passed, and Ali successfully completed Carmen's surgery. As a token of gratitude, the priest gave them his car and a basket of herbs that would help them stay awake during their journey. Ali offered to take the priest with them, but he refused. He revealed that several members of his group who had gone scouting never returned. Carmen asked Sam to stay, but he couldn't leave his friends. Sam promised to come back after they found a cure for the deadly sleep. After saying their goodbyes, the group continued on their journey. Elsewhere, Ellis had reached a city that was still brightly lit, as if nothing unusual had happened there. Amid all the chaos, some people were trying to live their lives as if everything was normal. Bill, a young man, took his girlfriend Nicole out on a date. They visited one of the city's best coffee shops to enjoy a cup of coffee, but it seemed their date wouldn't end there. The couple, Bill and Nicole, decided to continue their trip to Dallas, making a brief stop at a gas station to fill up their tank. While refueling, Nicole felt relieved to see other people around and cheerfully waved at them. However, the mood quickly turned grim when a gunshot rang out from above, followed by a man's body falling right in front of them. Terrified, Bill and Nicole immediately took cover behind their car, unsure of what to do. From a distance, they saw someone signaling with a flashlight. Summoning their courage, they counted to 3 and ran toward the person, even as the sniper continued firing. Luckily, they made it to safety and were taken to a hiding spot by the man, who turned out to be Ellis. Ellis explained that he had seen many bodies lying just 2 kilometers outside the city and had been evading sniper fire for days. In the abandoned garage that Ellis had turned into a safe haven, several others were gathered there as well. Beth, one of the group members, offered Nicole an adrenaline shot to help her stay awake. Bill, though hesitant, refused the injection. However, the group assumed Bill had another way of staying alert. After hearing the couple's reason for coming to Dallas, Nicole innocently mentioned that she wanted to visit the city's famous bakery before eventually succumbing to the deadly sleep. The idea annoyed Ellis. He emphasized that this wasn't the time to think about trivial things like that. Instead, Ellis urged everyone to focus on finding the starting point of the disaster, which he believed could help uncover a cure. However, before they could begin their search, Ellis decided to deal with the sniper blocking their movements. Meanwhile, Ali's group arrived at what was supposed to be a clinic, only to find an SUV being barraged with gunfire by a group of armed people. Jake, one of the team members, felt it was a trap and warned the group to be cautious. However, the determined ally decided to enter the building anyway to find her friend, Lex. Ellis, on the other hand, managed to approach the sniper undetected, but instead of the figure he had imagined, the sniper turned out to be a young girl named Meredith. She claimed she had no intention of hurting anyone. According to Meredith, most people in the city had already lost their sanity, and she felt responsible for cleaning them up. Meanwhile, Ali and Jake, determined to enter the clinic, decided to do something unexpected. They stripped down to prove they weren't a threat. The clinic guards, confused but wary, eventually let them in after Ali mentioned Lex's name. Back with Ellis, Meredith began to take control. After successfully distracting her guard, Meredith stated her demands. She wanted to join Ellis's group to find the source of the disaster. If not, she threatened to kill everyone in the hiding spot and continue her mission alone. With no other choice, Ellis agreed to her terms. Meanwhile, Allie finally reunited with Lex. The emotional moment made Jake, who was watching, feel awkward. However, Allie, still upset with Lex for leaving without warning, immediately started a small argument, reminding everyone of their sibling-like relationship. The men could only sigh at the two women, who, even in a dangerous situation, couldn't escape their unique dynamic. After gathering together, Ellis's group decided to get to know each other better. Amid the tense moments, they shared their stories. Strangely enough, the funniest story came from Jeffrey. He revealed that the reason he came to Dallas was to search for a bird that somehow was still alive amidst all the chaos. Beth's story was no less bizarre. She had received a call from someone warning her about a major tragedy just minutes before it actually happened. The anonymous caller left only a mystery, with a number bearing a Dallas area code. Intrigued, Beth decided to come to the city to find her mysterious savior. Jeffrey tried using the internet to trace the phone number, but their connection wasn't working. Frustrated, Bill offered to help. Using an old phone book, Bill managed to find out that the number was connected to a nursing home. The group immediately headed to the location. The scene there was horrifying. All the nursing home residents had passed away, leaving behind a stench that was hard to bear. Amid the disgust, Meredith noticed the presence of security cameras. They decided to check the footage from the night of the tragedy. Unfortunately, they didn't find any footage of the call being made. The mysterious person had carefully ensured they weren't caught on camera. Even so, Bill noticed something strange. He saw an apocalyptic warning appear on the screen at the exact moment before people died. That meant the announcement had been pre-recorded. Meredith then remembered there was a TV station not far from the nursing home. She suggested the group head there to look for further clues. However, as the discussion was ongoing, Bill noticed that Nicole had fallen asleep. He quickly woke her up by injecting adrenaline. But for Bill and Nicole, the journey had gone on long enough. They decided to split from the group and pursue Nicole's small dream, visiting the bakery she had always longed to see. Meredith was not okay with this. With a gun in her hand, she pointed it at Bill, suspicious because he never seemed to use stimulants yet never fell asleep either. Bill finally admitted it. He had been suffering from chronic insomnia for months. Instead of feeling cursed, Bill used his condition to give Nicole happy last days. For him, it was a way to make their final moments together unforgettable. On the other hand, at the clinic, Lex introduced the group to a substance they had just discovered. Although it wasn't the perfect cure, the substance allowed patients to sleep for a while without losing their lives. Lex explained that death usually occurred when the body transitioned into a deeper sleep stage, and this substance could prevent that process. Sam, a member of the group, became the first test subject. Although Jake strongly opposed it, Lex went ahead and gave it to Sam. Instantly, the boy's eyes closed and Sam fell asleep. Meanwhile, Bill and Nicole walked through the city like a couple in love. They found Nicole's dream bakery. Casually, Bill broke the shop's glass and grabbed some pastries to enjoy with his girlfriend. After satisfying themselves with croissants and cakes, they continued their journey to the cinema. In the empty movie theater, they played a classic black and white film. Sitting side by side, they hugged each other, preparing to say goodbye. Nicole ended the day by thanking Bill for the beautiful memories he had created. She rested her head on Bill's shoulder and slowly fell asleep. However, elsewhere, Sam, who was sleeping, began to suffer from a nightmare. In his dream, Sam was stuck in his last conversation with his father, a figure Sam deeply cherished. Lex explained that such nightmares were a side effect of the substance. Their journey was clearly far from over, with many mysteries and dangers waiting ahead. Although the substance allowed someone to sleep for a while, it turned out that Lex couldn't protect them from nightmares. Ellis's group managed to sneak into the TV station, but the atmosphere immediately became tense. The spotlight lit up brightly, followed by the voice of a man warning them with a threatening tone that he would open fire. However, the threat turned out to be a bluff. Ellis immediately recognized the voice as belonging to Alonzo Alvarez, a famous news anchor. Calmly, Ellis said they weren't going anywhere. Alonzo, the tired-looking older man, finally gave in. He turned off the spotlight and stepped out of the shadows. Elsewhere, Jake was given an injection of a substance to help him sleep. But as soon as Jake closed his eyes, nightmares struck him. In his dream, he saw the figure of the late Sarah and little Megan tormenting him. Lex and Allie, who were keeping watch, began to panic when Jake suddenly started convulsing and his heart stopped beating. Fortunately, the doctors managed to save him just in time. Meanwhile, Sam started showing signs of weakening. Lex tried to wake him up, but failed. However, this turned out to just be Allie's nightmare. When the girl woke up, Allie felt relieved to see her friends were okay. Back at the TV station, Ellis interrogated Alonzo. But the old man seemed to have no clear answers about who triggered the mysterious signal. Alonzo explained that he had arrived late to the studio that day because his wife had just passed away and he had to take care of her. During the conversation, Ellis began to realize that Alonzo had lost his sanity. The old man insisted that he had to continue broadcasting, even though there were no more viewers watching. Even his team had left the studio long ago. Without raising Alonzo's suspicion, Ellis asked to see the generator location. Alonzo, though reluctant, eventually agreed. Alonzo explained that the signal might have come from a mysterious wave causing the deaths. However, Alonzo also stalled, trying to distract them by talking about the safe sleep zone, a place where people could still rest peacefully. Unfortunately, Alonzo wasn't sure if such a zone actually existed. As they let their guard down, Alonzo suddenly fled and locked the control room door from the outside. With a smug tone, Alonzo shouted that they shouldn't interrupt his important work. Elsewhere, Lex introduced the group to her boss, Dr. Abrams, a scientist who Lex considered their only hope to save the world. Meanwhile, Jake found an aquarium in the clinic where a shark was swimming peacefully. Strangely, the creature looked exactly like the one that had appeared in her friend's dreams, the shark that became the early symbol of the apocalypse. Seeing Alonzo staying awake by hurting himself, like burning his skin with cigarettes, Ellis became more certain that the man had lost his sanity. Ellis tried to distract Alonzo, while the others searched for a way to open the control room door. However, their efforts were halted when Beth's husband tried to negotiate with Alonzo. Unfortunately, his attempt failed, and the man died right in front of Beth. Ellis realized they were dealing with someone extremely dangerous. Meanwhile, Dr. Abrams sent his team into the city to bring back more survivors. However, Dr. Abrams didn't care whether they wanted to join or not. All those brought back were simply considered test subjects for the next experiment. In a quiet corner of the suburbs, two men were busy cleaning their weapons. Clayton, his face filled with determination, once again refused his partner's offer of stimulants. For him, anger was the only fuel he needed. After losing his son, Clayton had only one goal: to hunt down and punish those responsible. Jeffrey, the man next to him, was more focused on technical matters. Jeffrey checked the broken systems, looking for a way to restore power and open the locked doors. Meanwhile, Alonzo kept talking, trying to explain his actions. But his efforts only sounded like aimless rambling. When the lights finally came back on, the atmosphere shifted. As soon as the door opened, Beth charged into the studio, dragging Alonzo to appear live on air. Without much hesitation, Jeffrey cut the power again, this time by disconnecting the satellite that was broadcasting the mysterious signal. Screens across the country suddenly went black. Now they just had to see if their actions worked. Jeffrey recalled a memory, a raven that survived the chaos. To him, the bird was a sign, some sort of message that he had an important role to play. With that belief, Jeffrey decided to test their theory. He prepared a pillow, lay down, and closed his eyes for the first time in days. However, their hope was shattered. Jeffrey didn't wake up. Not even the adrenaline could restart his heart. In the midst of despair, Jake suddenly remembered something Ellis had once said. Jake shared the idea with Allie, who reluctantly acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, the pilot was still alive and there was hope of uncovering the mystery. Elsewhere, the team sent by Dr. Abrams managed to find a test subject, but they fell into Clayton's hands. With no-nonsense methods, Clayton forced them to reveal the secret of how to infiltrate the clinic. Unaware of this threat, the scientists continued to work as usual. Meanwhile, Sam observed Lex with curiosity. Trust began to grow between them, until Lex finally asked Sam to meet Dr. Abrams in person. In the midst of exhaustion and despair, Beth finally gave up. She revealed to her friends that she just wanted to sleep. For good. Meredith tried to stop her, but Beth had already lost the will to carry on. Sam, innocent and full of curiosity, approached Dr. Abrams without suspicion. When the doctor offered him a chance to participate in their experiment, Sam agreed without hesitation. Meanwhile, Ellis presented his theory. Simply turning off the satellite at the studio wasn't enough. To truly end all of this, they would need to go to the NASA space station and shut down the main satellite there. However, the plan sounded like a fantasy. Even Meredith and Beth, who heard this theory, reminded Ellis that he might just be hallucinating. John, the friend Ellis was talking to, had actually been dead for a long time. At the clinic, Jake discovered a storage room full of patients' personal belongings. Among the items, Jake spotted something that made him freeze: the masks worn by the children of Pastor Julio's congregation. But none of those children were there. On the other hand, Allie started to suspect something. All the photos Lex showed her were of children. When Allie demanded an explanation, Lex just smiled, pretending not to understand her meaning. At that moment, Jake entered the room and quickly explained what had happened at the clinic. As soon as Jake realized Sam was in danger, He rushed to find his friend. Without hesitation, Jake barged into the lab just as Dr. Abrams was preparing an experimental vaccine to inject into Sam's body. The doctor seemed increasingly aggressive, gripping the syringe tightly, refusing to let go of his test subject. Dr. Abrams even firmly convinced Allie, a medical professional, that without this injection, the disaster they were facing wouldn't be solved. Allie and Jake finally managed to take Sam away from the doctor. After finding out that Lex was the one who sent Sam there, Allie exploded with anger. She felt betrayed and firmly stated that their friendship was over. However, before they could talk more, an alarm suddenly went off. Armed people rushed in, and the command to seek shelter was heard. In the chaos, Jake took the chance to lead Allie and Sam toward the exit. On their way, they ran into Clayton, who looked very angry. But as soon as Clayton saw Sam, he let them pass. Clayton then demanded that Dr. Abrams be handed over to him, but the doctor came out willingly. Calmly, Abrams convinced Clayton to lower his weapon, and as soon as the man did, the doctor injected the serum that had been prepared for Sam. In an instant, Clayton's heart stopped. Dr. Abrams, disappointed, stated that the serum still hadn't worked. Lex, who witnessed this, tried to stop their escape. However, Allie reassured Jake that she could talk to her friend and convince her to let them go. Allie then gave an emotional speech, but Lex pointed a gun at her and ordered them to return and hand over Sam. Jake finally stepped in. Quickly, Jake helped Allie into the car and drove them all away. Elsewhere, Ellis recorded a final message for Jake, Allie, and Sam. In the message, Ellis revealed that he couldn't hold on much longer, and that night, he planned to end it all and finally sleep in peace. The man wasn't bluffing. After recording his message, Ellis lay in bed at the best hotel in Dallas. Beside him, Meredith lay, and in the bed next to hers, Beth also rested. Before falling asleep, they thanked each other for everything they had been through together.